Thank you for joining us right now for this panel. Thank you for joining us online. Quick wave to the cameras. So this next session is talking about the topic of supplier diversity. Now, rather than me introducing my esteemed panelists and forum members here, because you're here to hear what they've got to say, not what I've got to say, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But I will say their names: Jim Townsend and Jean Chawapiwa. Jim, who are you and why are you here?
Yeah, it's a good question. Geez, that's deep. So who am I? So I used to be CPO at Walgreens Boots Alliance. I'm now do a lot of work in advisory, a lot of work with private equity, and quite a lot of work with procurement technology companies as well. Huge interest in supply diversity. Led a large program in the USA. Kicked off a fledgling program in the large program in the USA and kicked off a fledgling program in the UK. So hugely passionate subject of mine.
And Jean.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitations. I am the head of member services at MSD UK. We identify ethnic minority-owned businesses and introduce them to corporates who are looking to diversify their supply chain. My background also is, I've been with MSD UK now for 2 years. Prior to that, I worked with We Connect International for 6 years, running the South Africa market, working with women-owned businesses. And prior to that, I did a lot of years in corporates, working with Rio Tinto and Barrick in lots of parts of Africa. So really got to love the idea of community engagement, making sure that we engage for good. And that led me to We Connect and now to MSD UK.
Okay, thank you. So 2 fantastic panelists. We will be asking you to get involved as well. So at any stage, if you have any questions or any insight that you want to share, please do throw your hand in the air and I'll try and spot you. And we do have a microphone that we can bring to you as well. So please do try and get involved as well. My job here is really just to instigate the conversation. And I'm going to try and do that in a slightly controversial way by saying that there's a lot of myths out there about supplier diversity. So to start with, can you bust them for us, or can you bust all of them?
I can start with a few. I think certainly working with the diverse businesses I worked with, starting with women-owned businesses, then ethnic minority-owned businesses, there's a tendency for some of the large corporate to think that diverse businesses are small and almost startups. And there are some incredible diverse-owned businesses out there that are multi-generational, that are doing incredible technology, highly innovative, and are turning over hundreds of millions of pounds and dollars, etc. We have diverse businesses that are turning over billions of dollars. And so I think that, for me, is something that we need to make sure we cross that off the list.
And you said that. Could you actually name some of those companies, or would that be unfair to mention them by name?
Yeah, in the US, I can think of the one that jumps to mind is Agile One, owned by Janice. She's one of the black female billionaires. In the UK, we're working with Farida Gibbs. She owns the largest woman-owned construction company, black-owned women construction company in the UK, and there's lots more.
Okay.
There's lots more.
Jim, what myths are you going to bust for us today?
Okay, first of all, but it's going to cost you more. No, it isn't. Why would that possibly be true? And there's no evidence to suggest that. As I said, I led a very large supply diversity program in the USA, and one thing it didn't cost us was more. In fact, if anything, it probably cost us less as we kind of worked through that process. Secondly, that this is, and forgive me, I'm not sure if it's quite the right way to articulate it, but this is all around wokeism. It absolutely isn't. It's around doing the right thing for your business and doing the right thing. It is, the other thing I would say is that there's a belief that companies end up with too many small suppliers. and kind of one of your points, Gene, when we were chatting earlier on, there's, in actual fact, diverse suppliers aren't all small. There's some very large diverse suppliers out there. And secondly, I would say there's ways to manage your supply chain. You know, so if you've got diverse suppliers which are in, say, like the temp labour market, you can work with MSPs and what have you. You can work with kind of sub-tier approaches and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of ways to kind of get through this and kind of crack that. But these things are absolutely myths. I think the most important thing for me, though, is that you've got to find, or you've got to get to a point where your leadership team absolutely believes in supply diversity and connects supply diversity to true business value. Until you get to that point, you're wasting your time, frankly.
You say they're the leadership team. What specific function or what specific title in the leadership?
Exec CEO.
Okay.
If a CEO doesn't believe it, don't bother doing it.
And I would add the CPO is really important in making sure they drive it through procurement, but also make sure that they engage their leadership team. So if the CPO is sitting with the rest of the leadership team and not getting them involved, then we know that it's not going to go far enough within the organization. So leadership engagement is really important.
And I think, sorry, just to add to that, I think part of a CPO's role is to act as an ambassador on the subject and drive the agenda at the board level and the exec team level.
I was going to say that as well, and we know that CPOs in recent years have had more of a voice, certainly in the C-suite and board level as well. So that's part of their duty and responsibility to push for more diversity in suppliers, right?
Yeah. You got to live by your own values, haven't you?
Yeah. Okay, well, that was a short session. No, I'm joking. Okay, so what are some of the primary business benefits? Because you mentioned there, for instance, we've busted some of those myths about cost, for instance. So what are the business benefits of having this diverse program when it comes to suppliers beyond simply fulfilling diversity requirements? And are some companies guilty of doing it purely because they are doing it for diversity requirements?
Yeah, I mean, for MSD UK, we're working at the moment with 124 corporate members that have joined us. And I would say probably 40% of them are doing this because they really believe in it. It's part of their values. They're really driving it through the organization. And some of them have been doing supply diversity for a long time. Maybe they've called it something else. A large number of them were the US-based companies where supply diversity has really gone a long way. So NMSDC has been just celebrated 50 years of doing supply diversity and very successfully. And a number of our members come from that generation of companies. Then we have probably about another 30% of companies who are coming in saying, show me how to do this. How do I get value from this? And they're doing peer engagements with us. They're really looking at diverse suppliers and looking where they can bring them in, doing mentoring and coaching, etc. So we have a very good selection of corporates that are not just ticking the box, but are really living the values. And why are they doing that? Because they get innovative suppliers. They get access to some incredible young, innovative ideas. MSD UK has just had 2 conferences, one in London and one in Amsterdam. And for both of them, we had an innovation challenge. And the talent that came through these innovations was incredible. You're talking about 20, 30-year-olds who've already raised 4 million towards their products and are really innovating around waste and sustainability, etc. So the corporates get access to that. And a lot of them embrace it and then really move forward with it. So I think for me, there's a great benefit of supply diversity to actually meet those young suppliers as they rise.
And Jim, what's your experience of this? Because obviously you've seen it from the large corporation side, I suppose, in terms of trying to engage more diversity in suppliers and what those suppliers can bring. So what attracts you especially to that?
So I agree with what Gene said there. Let me come in at the question from a slightly different angle. So if you think about it, so the organisation I worked for previously was one of the world's largest retailers and pharmacy businesses. We also had a huge healthcare services business, pharmaceutical distribution business, operated in about 30 countries at one point. But if I think about our kind of core business in the US, Walgreens, where we got 9,000 pharmacies and retail outlets, a very large percentage of our customer base was from minority groups. How can you possibly serve that customer base if you don't understand them? How can you possibly develop new product offerings and develop your marketing and sales plans, employee engagement, supplier engagement, unless you've got a supply base that is actually has a deep and meaningful understanding of those challenges? You know, so if we were developing products for, say, the Hispanic community in the US, you know what? We engage with Hispanic suppliers and partners to help us develop that, because their insight and know-how is absolutely key in terms of being successful in that space. So that's one thing. It's the representation of your supply chain to mirror your customer base. But then I think separately you've got your employee base, which I think exactly the same is true as well. You know, you need your internal team to be made up of a broad representation as well to address those business challenges. And fundamentally, as I said earlier, it's just the right thing to do. Why wouldn't you? You will be more successful and more profitable as a business if you create offerings which are mindful of those diverse requirements of your customer. And to do that, you have to have a diverse team, both internal and external, to achieve it.
And I wanted to add that the market has a lot of buyers that are spending money that are from the diverse groups. And I think we are now more aware of which companies are representing us and which companies are not. And I think it stands to chance that if I walk into Boots or Tesco and things, I want to see products that represent me as well. Yeah. And that there's that variety. And if it's not there, then I take my money elsewhere. So I think that's also making the organization sit up and take note. And I know with advertising and marketing, it has to speak to the audience. The younger people have a lot of spending power, and they want adverts that speak to them. Otherwise, they move on.
And sometimes it's not just about diverse suppliers, it's about diverse teams within suppliers. Yeah. You know, and I recall a situation probably about 4 years ago or so. We were running a global marketing pitch. This thing was worth probably several $1 billion. And we were working with 3 or 4 of the world's largest kind of media agencies, and you kind of all know who they are, I'm sure. One of them turned up with only one group represented, largely male, all of a certain age. And the point is, when they turned up with that said something about how they understood our customers or didn't understand our customers, and how they connected with us as a customer and what was important to us. Needless to say, they didn't progress beyond that day. Yeah, and that was an example of how an organisation makes very absolutely key decisions in terms of partnerships based on their understanding of their customer base and how it kind of selects those partners as well.
Okay, we've talked quite a bit there about the US market and obviously the UK as well. That it's fair to say probably have a more enlightened view of supplier diversity than some places around the world. So if you're a multinational organisation, for instance, then how do you address that? Because obviously there are, you know what I'm saying, there are certain markets where supplier diversity is given more, what's the word I'm looking for? Precedent, maybe? Yeah. Whereas in other places it's less in the spotlight. So if you're a company that works globally and internationally, what's the best balance, or how do you pick what your benchmark is?
I think certainly with the global organizations we're working with, it's around having local champions. So who in your organization is sitting in France or Belgium or the UK who can actually start to understand the market and be able to lead? Also working with organizations like ourselves and We Connect and all the other diverse organizations who have in-country diverse suppliers to be able to help you to understand what the market is out there and what kind of diverse suppliers you can access. MSD UK has just started a project in 6 countries in Europe and ESDP, and we went into those 6 countries because our corporate members said, these are the countries where we spend money and we need to find diverse suppliers. We've done supply diversity very well in the US. We're now doing it well in the UK. And now, how do we now master these other markets? And we're finding we have to collaborate to understand the markets. So it's not just MSD UK team. It's actually working with some of the local groups in those communities and countries who've been working with diverse suppliers. It's engaging with the legal teams to understand what can we ask and what can't we ask. There's nuances between what you can do in Germany and what you can do in France around diversity. So it's us coming together, tapping into the local knowledge, and then using the expertise of those who've grown supply diversity markets globally, and then saying, how do we do this better, but also do it effectively and within the law?
Okay.
You know, I'm not sure I can add anything to that. I think
No, do
that's
you know what?
perfect.
I know. I was gonna come back, and I think you just covered it all off completely.
Sorry.
So we've agreed on the benefits. We agreed on the myths that needed to be dismissed. Mm-hmm. Let's say we are implementing this supplier diversity program. How do we measure the success of it, and what does success look like? You know, what metrics do you use to gauge your supplier diversity program?
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, thanks. So I think and it's different for different sectors. You know, I think it's very different for an engineering firm that produces large, complex mechanical assemblies, shall we say, versus, say, a retailer. And I'm probably best to talk about the latter rather than the former. But if I look at that, you know, from a retailer perspective, it's about brand. You know, as a brand, are we doing the right thing by ourselves, by our customers? And, you know, that's kind of the acid test in many respects. So I think that's kind of part of it. Secondly, there's something around, and this is a bit prosaic, but go with it anyway, please, which is there's something about, are you putting the spend in those communities that need it most? Yeah? So if you've got a customer base which is, let's say, 50% diverse, and you're able to put a significant amount of spend into those communities, and as I said earlier, you're getting some real business benefit back from doing that, why wouldn't you? Because that also builds brand loyalty and connectivity with your organisation. And then I think the other, I'm not sure it's a measure, but I kind of spoke about this a little bit a few moments ago, but as you become more mature in this space, you'll see that your customer offerings start to change, start to develop. And just as you were saying, when you go into a store, you want to see products that are relevant to you. Mm-hmm. You don't want to see, you know, a generic set of products for everybody. You want to see something that makes you feel a little bit special, that gets you excited because it kind of celebrates something that you're about as an individual. So, I think that's kind of really key to us. And I think we forget just how far we've come in many respects as well. You know, if you wind back the clock probably 20, 30 years ago, there was much less of that opportunity. And we've come an awful long way, and I think we should celebrate that.
We've come a long way. Have we come far enough?
No, not yet. I mean, answering the same question, currently at MSD UK, we have a target of trying to achieve £1 billion spend from our corporate members to our diverse suppliers within our network, but also work getting the diverse suppliers to buy from each other, because that's a really important network, that they collaborate and buy from each other. Spend is a really important metric of success. Let's not get away from that. It's important that the contracts are getting into the hands of the diverse suppliers. Otherwise, we're just talking. So it's really important. But how do you get to the spend? You have to do mentoring and engagement. Some diverse suppliers are 60% of the way there and need to be supported to say, you know, this is how you make your pitch better. This is how you make your product better. Let me get somebody to help you to work through the organization. The onboardings can be very complex in an organization. So all of the mentoring and coaching is important, and we do some of that. And it's also really important for the ethnic minority suppliers to understand where are the real opportunities. So, and I think the engagements that we have between the corporates and the suppliers helps them to understand that, because the market is shifting all the time. But where are the real opportunities? As a corporate starts with us, one of the things we encourage them to do is to look at this pipeline and really understand where are the opportunities for the diverse suppliers. Not everything is going to be open to diverse suppliers, but identify what is open to them, and then let's engage them on it. Let's make sure they know about it. And if somebody needs to pivot to be able to go into that opportunity, then the engagement will help them to do that. But success looks like a lot of young ethnic minority-owned business, elderly ethnic minority-owned businesses, all feeling successful and being visibly successful. That's what I think success looks like.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, really, really well put. I think that point around how do you actually kind of navigate this and figure out where to start. I think the one of the things that we did very successfully was essentially have a category heat map where we looked at all of the different categories we spent all of our kind of billions of dollars on, and kind of said, where do we actually focus? And there's some real obvious places not to focus. You know, so for example, enterprise-wide software. You know, we're not in a position where, you know, our kind of diversity program is going to be able to focus on SAP space or Oracle space or whatever. It's not going to happen. So I don't need to worry about that. Nor is it going to happen from a utilities perspective. I can put that to one side. But hey, look, there's some really great spaces here. And we thought about this in two ways. And kind of picking up on what we spoke a little bit earlier about was there's certain suppliers where we can really target significant spend to those communities that need it most. And that would always be a process which was a competitive process. You know, the most competitive and best positioned supplier would typically win that business. You know, it wasn't about selecting a diverse supplier over a non-diverse supplier. The diverse supplier won it because they were best for the work. You know, so, you know, that was pretty clear. But then there's this other angle which we looked at, which was quite a bit more. In reality, it was kind of a level above that, in as much that we looked for diverse suppliers that could help shape the thinking and the direction of the company. You know, as I spoke a little bit about in terms of product development and getting diverse input into product development, in actual fact, getting diverse input into company strategy and company direction, company marketing plans, company brand, was incredibly powerful. And whilst that may not have been the lion's share of the spend, it was huge in terms of shifting the needle in terms of what we wanted to become. So there's one element which was getting real spend into the communities, and the other element was let's get insight and perspectives in terms of shaping where we're going.
I want to talk about the challenges and the opportunities. I know we've touched on this already, but what you say, what are the most common challenges faced when you want to implement a supplier diversity program? And obviously, importantly, how can we actually overcome those challenges? Jean?
So with our members, what we always say is that it's a journey. It really is a journey, and there is no one road that leads to being the best in supplier diversity. Depending on the industry that you're in, the internal and leadership support you have, the journey can differ. So we really try to work with our corporates to say, you know, understand your organization and understand where the low-hanging fruit are. So is it a case of, you know, you want to start with facilities management, and that's where the opportunities lie, and then we work around finding you the suppliers in facilities management? Or do we just need to help you to identify the barriers to entry? Because that's often one of the big barriers is companies have 120 days payment terms. The small suppliers can't survive that. They have onboarding systems that it's like doing an MBA. you know, and the small suppliers can't do that. So we help them to understand, you know, what are the barriers that you need to remove to allow suppliers to come in, and then also understand the pipeline and what we can help you with. We've had several organizations asking us for companies in logistics, and they want companies that can do logistics around the countries and over the borders, and that's difficult to find. We have Pickfords as a member, and they're now ethnic minority owned, great, but we can't give you 10, 11, 12, 13 of those kinds of suppliers, but there are industries where we can give you suppliers. So I think the barriers are really, you know, understanding the internal organizations, the champions, as well as understanding where we can help you.
Yeah, so just building on that, so, and some of this we've talked about again, but get that leadership belief. If you don't get it, pause at that point, reflect on why you're not getting it. Secondly, I'd see get the kind of team belief that's kind of driving that, work out who those champions are, make sure those champions are super excited and motivated by it.
Yeah.
You know, figure out how you're going to get traction, and one of those ways to get traction is to be very public about your commitments. So some organisations make some very clear statements around the diversity within their supply chains, and that in turn sends a very clear message to their customers, to their employees, and to their shareholders as well. I think on top of that, I think I would say there's some of those challenges in terms of the practical stuff. I think you touched on a bit of it there, Gene. I say you need a clear policy, and that policy needs to be something that's lived and something that's practiced and you're held to account on. I think you might decide to actually make the organisation and individuals bonus dependent on diversity. I've seen that work well. I've seen it not work so well as well, you know, but that's something to consider. I think you've got to kind of get to a point which says, and this is maybe one of the hardest points, it's a real detail, but many of the people here with a procurement background will really get it. You've got to make sure that diverse suppliers get the opportunity, and that there is or you've minimised conscious bias as much as possible. Yeah, you'll never eliminate it for sure, but I think that's kind of really important. I think you touched on payment terms, simpler terms, onboarding, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, that's practical stuff that most of us can do. And most of us can kind of tackle and make a real difference. Yeah?
I wanted to go back on the leadership. Some organizations that we work with is actually led from the ground up. So you have somebody who's a champion, either in procurement or sustainability, who gets the role and really drives it into the organizations. It's a pleasure to work with those people who just say, I need to really knock down the barriers internally in my organization. How can you help me and work with me? And we get them to engage with other champions in supplier diversity. So you can have an organization where leadership is just still looking the other way, but you have an internal team that just drives it into the organization. We've also got some of our members who've actually built teams of internal champions. So they identify individuals within the different groups within the organization. They bring them together. They teach them about supplier diversity. They find ways to recognize the achievements that they have, and they become the agents within each team that say, hey, we're looking for a speaker for this internal thing. Why don't we get a diverse supplier? Hey, we've got Women's Day. Why don't we get all the gifts bought in by so-and-so? And that works really well as well. So having those internal champions who want to do supplier diversity and want the organization to do supplier diversity can be a huge way forward as well.
Sorry, you just made me think of something. Just in terms of that, I think many people are surprised at just how much enthusiasm there is for the subject when they get into it, and they'll be surprised that certain individuals that you never would have imagined had a passion for the subject suddenly get out there and go, you see a whole new light to them, and the light bulb kind of goes on in their mind about the subject, and they become evangelists. And really kind of spread the word and really kind of engage the wider organisation with such positivity around it. So, and that's that kind of a real rewarding aspect from a leadership perspective. To see individuals within your team grab the subject and make real change and get real traction.
So get the CEO on board and then get the champions in place. Is that the strategy?
Yeah, and the CPO as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the CPOs, obviously. Yeah,
Yeah.
It goes without saying.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to tackle the naysayers. Just get in there, as a CPO, you're there to have tough conversations, and individual X wants to stop with company Y for whatever reason. You need to challenge that. You should be challenging that irrespective of whether it's a conversation about a diverse supplier or not. But absolutely be ready to have that broader conversation.
And I think, I wanted to add something we'd said we would mention at the beginning is that diverse suppliers, so you have women-owned businesses are diverse, ethnic minority are diverse. You've now got in the UK, out Britain, also diverse suppliers. You've got the veterans, and you've got people with disabilities. You've got lots of social enterprises that are coming up. All of those are groups that need support and help as with diverse suppliers, and it's important that we know and understand the wide range of diverse suppliers we're talking about. So when we're talking about spend, I think globally, we still have a lot of corporations spending less than or up to 1% on diverse suppliers. So that includes all of those groups. Not even 1% with women-owned 1%, but 1% overall. So when we're growing it, we need to really understand how much growth we need for this to be really impactful. And I think that's really important that we make sure that all the different diverse groups are included, but also that growth is not about growing this group and forgetting this group, but actually growing them across the different networks.
Jim, one takeaway from you before we bring the session to a close.
One takeaway for the team. For the audience. I think, for me, the takeaway would be engage your exec leadership team in the conversation and see where they want to take it.
And Jean, anything to add there?
I would say meet the diverse suppliers. I can see a few familiar faces in the room of some of the diverse suppliers within our network. They've got incredible businesses. One of the things we do with our members is we really encourage them to come to networking sessions where they meet them face-to-face, whether over Zoom or the face-to-face with the conferences, because it makes a huge difference. When you've met the person, you can see how incredibly intelligent they are, how innovative they are, and that they are working with lots of other corporates. So, we've got lots of our diverse suppliers who've worked with EY for many decades, Accenture, GSK, Boots, etc., and they're out there and ready to do work.
Okay, nice line to finish it on, I think. We don't have time for questions, I'm afraid. Thank you so much to Jim and to Jean. Thank you both.